we have now Dominik Rohrmus on the panel. Dr. Dominik Rohrmus is the CTO of the lab network Industrie 4.0. And he's going to introduce to us the Gaia X project, which is actually the European initiative on data sharing between businesses. And we know that data sharing becomes important for the collaboration. COVID-19 pushes us in collaboration. We need digital platforms that allow this type of collaboration. So I'm very glad to have Dominik here on the panel. Dominik, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, I will share my screen. So you should see it now. Excellent. Thank you very much for having me, and a warm welcome from Germany to Switzerland. I am also very happy and glad to meet friends again, and a big warm welcome and greetings to Mexico, to David, and also to Dong, to Ulsan in Korea. Thank you very much for your excellent presentations and talks and comments. Let me start to say that I was very impressed by the presentation of Francesco Betti from the World Economic Forum. However, I would like to open a perspective which might be interesting. And I would like to, in my presentation, comment a little bit deeper on one bullet point that he had on his slide, that was customer-centric. We are not so sure if customer-centric is really the future of a digitalized economy, or if it is rather user-centric. And if it is user-centric, then this means that the perspectives in all areas change quite heavily. And Gaia X is one of those ways we think about this kind of paradigm change that we observe. So I will elaborate a little bit further on that. And I'm really happy that Dr. Betti from the World Economic Forum mentioned and elaborated on that topic. Let me briefly summarize also on the COVID situation. I did not prepare a specific slide for that. In Germany, we execute roughly 290,000 tests per day in Germany. That varies a little bit between 200 and 290,000 tests per day. And the very sad situation is that there are more than 20,000 positive new infections per day currently. This and every one of you who had a little bit of math in school, this exponential development could be foreseen since more or less April, and so we are quite unhappy that the measures did not take so much effect. There are two situations which are kind of special from a pure German perspective. We have 9 neighboring countries. There's only another country in the world that also has 9. And due to this high number of neighbors, there is no way that we can, or it doesn't make sense at all to close borders. And all those measures from April actually didn't really help. This was not the key to success. And so in being in an ecosystem, in a European ecosystem, it is totally clear that at any time, all countries in Central Europe, in continental Europe, get to a similar level of infection. Thank God we have the European Union, in my opinion, and we can help each other with capacities in hospitalization and treatment, etc., etc. So we do hope in Germany that we are able to control the numbers by the measures undertaken. So while Korea can lower itself to level 1, we need to increase to, we call it dark red. So not only red, but dark red. And that means that we have a partial lockdown and everyone is in home office and no more restaurants are open, etc., etc., which is not good for the economy on one side, but it's necessary to prevent that elderly people and other risk population parts are protected. And I think personally also, but also the government in Germany believes that We have to look at the entire society, not only on parts of the society, and I think this is valid for all human democracies and around the globe. Every age group and every risk group has to be able to participate in life and in public life. So we have to protect in a very deep and serious way all portions and all parts of the society. Again, the explosion of Corona is really very sad. It even personally affects me. I was planning on a trip to South Korea in December, got cancelled, obviously, and that's quite sad. So again, I do hope that we get the numbers under control towards December, January. I personally don't believe that this will be completely achievable, but at least I have the hope. Thank you very much for having me now in the next 30 minutes on exclusive insights into Gaia X. I'm not sure if they are exclusive, we'll see. We have to, Europe's cloud platform might not be the right term. We have to rather see if what platform economy and serious data platform-based economy means and how that can be realized. Let me start by looking back. September 9th, last year in Biel in Switzerland, where Dominik Rohrmus is sitting right now, looked like this. Everything was normal. Before the beginning of the conference, we took that picture, and you see how impressive the smart factory developed already in those days. Smart solutions everywhere. The space is almost not sufficient to be able to show it all, and that is very impressive. So my deep congratulations to the entire Swiss Smart Factory team for their achievements. I will start my presentation to look by looking on a broader scale. Next year, Industry 4.0, the term is 10 years old. And what is the idea, or what was the goal, the idea behind it? And it can be summarized in 3 dimensions. Interoperability is for us as LNI, as the association, which is pre-competitive and neutral and non-profit, on the center currently. But autonomy, the second dimension, and sovereignty, which is missing there, unfortunately, is the enabler for those technologies that were mentioned by Dong. So, hello, Dong. Nice to see you. And also in the meeting, in the presentation before by Francisco Betti, and we fully agree. And autonomy and sovereignty requires a lot, and my presentation will closely follow that. All this is necessary to be able to achieve sustainability in its 2 dimensions. On one side, let me say, good work, good life, and on the other, climate change and climate control. And these 2 sub-dimensions of sustainability require interoperability and autonomy at a cost level that sustainability can be achieved without too much impact on economical development. Briefly, where are we? How is it set up in Germany? We have a very specific setup in Germany. That is due to kind of our cultural background, and to be very precise, to the last 600 years of economical development in Germany, and the culture on how we do business and how we do industry. Certainly industrialization is younger, but it all started with the Hanse, with the trade union around the Baltic Sea. And from those principles, we basically derived the way how we operationalize industry and work in Germany still. So we have 2 dimensions. We have a top-down and a bottom-up dimension. This is top-down, and this here is bottom-up. And we need both. And that is always my recommendation whenever I give a presentation around the globe. You have to have both. The way how you deeply, or how deep you operationalize these 2 ways just depends on where you are. But you need both dimensions. You cannot exclude one. So top down in Germany, we have, and that is also kind of a cultural topic in our country. We have very strong associations, industry associations. There are some missing here. The reason is very simple, because they have their own setup, but that is closely interconnected. For instance, here we have machine building, electrical and software, certainly chemical, automotive, etc. are missing here, but they're not inactive. They just have a different setup, and it would just be too big for my presentation to cover them all. And for us, international or Industry 4.0 has two dimensions which they operate on a top-down level. One is internationalization, and there really the focus is on the European Union. European Union, including Switzerland. This is really where we are active. And globally, these countries are in our center point, and certainly Korea is one of them. You need bottom up in your ecosystem, in your national and European ecosystem. LNI is, as I mentioned before, completely neutral. It is a formal association, it's a legal body, which is pre-competitive and non-profit. And it closely collaborates with the chambers of commerce. This is where my statement for the 600 years is closing into now. There are close to 80 chambers of commerce in Germany, and all companies in Germany are members of these chambers of commerce. And by that, we have a melting point, which is a hub to kind of let information flow. And by the way, this was one of the key helpers in March and April with respect to the COVID crisis. We have a similar setup in Switzerland, by the way. We are used to work with associations. Almost everyone, every person in Germany who is working is somehow connected to an association or to a legal body, to a chamber of commerce. So information flow and ways to find solutions is part of our working culture. So whenever a dramatic situation comes up, you have a telephone number to talk to, and this telephone number to talk to is connected to the governmental levels and to the systems which have experts in that area. So by that vehicle, very fast reaction and very fast and very high acceptance rates on a very broad public and people level is possible within a couple of days. This is a huge advantage for us to be able to handle the situation. And let me explicitly say that this is not centralized. It is completely decentralized, and that speeds up extremely. That is at least our experience. We in LNI operationalize so-called use cases and testbeds. I'll come back to that later on. And by that, we pump information to standardization and normative activities. And this is extremely important to us. Let me briefly elaborate on that because it is so relevant. You might ask, why do you need 10 years of Industry 4.0? The answer is more or less given here. The problem is not technology. You can assume that this is there. The problem is also not the acceptance by societies. This is also achieved. The problem is a little bit different. It is here, normative and standardization. And I will later on come back to that in my Gaia X presentation. Normative is hardened against civil and criminal law. And you need it for operational technologies like factories, operative technologies like factories and similar things. There you have to have norms, because when a prosecutor comes into your place because something happened, you will be hardened against norms. There's a background noise. Yeah, thank you. While standardization is only hardened against civil law. And that means that standards are very fast, 1 to 3 years, while norms require 3 to 5 years. In these two global normative organizations, ISO and IEC, 167 countries are organized. That means you are compliant with your products. Let's say you're a machine builder in Switzerland and you export globally. You don't need a local representative in Kenya or in, I don't know, certainly China, US, etc., European Union, to ensure that your machine, your service, your industrial solution is compliant and can be operated compliant when you export it. This is the reason why this is so extremely important. And with 167 countries, if you think of 203 members of the United Nations, you almost cover the entire world. But while national legislation stops at the political borders of these countries, so that doesn't help you really when you think in ways of export. Thinking in these dimensions, it becomes clear that testing and multiplication is very, very important. In Germany, we have 400,000 small medium enterprises that are related to industrial production and industrial services and industry in general, out of the 3.5 million enterprises in total. Those 400,000 can enter 26 so-called competence centers, which are fully financed, the red and blue dots. And you might say, okay, is that enough? Yes, it is enough because it will be leveraged by the chambers of commerce. And this way helps us to try out and to play Industry 4.0 on a low-level entry thing. So there are almost no obstacles for SMEs to get help and to get support and to play and to try out. And this tryout can be leveraged and bundled in so-called testbeds. And from there, we can centrally give input to global normative activities and initiate those. This is exactly how we operationalize it. And it was already mentioned that interoperability is very important. And there's one thing with a crazy name, it's called Asset Administration Shell, which is for us in the center of interoperability. There are basic technologies when it comes to communication, like time-sensitive networking. Edge management is extremely important technology. Semantic description, semantic modeling is very important, and cloud-to-cloud communication. I will come back to that in my slide here now. So very briefly, when we talk about data economy, we have to have data on a level of information. So data plus something yields information. Data itself is not sufficient. So the new oil of the 21st century is not data, it is information. This phrasing, data is the new oil, is not sufficient. And we call the implementation of Industry 4.0 the digital twin of Industry 4.0. And this is for us the asset administration shell, because it enables cross-company interoperability. That is a big difference between B2B, business to business, and C2C, consumer to consumer. So we have to have cross-company interoperability. And it has to be enabling non-intelligent and intelligent products, and it has to cover the entire life cycle, from product development, through production, through usage, to the phase out, to the recycling. This is for us important. And during this entire life cycle, the amount of information in this product increases dramatically. And for the recycling later on, if we have a standardized representation of all information within this product, including its production way, then we can really do data economy on a level as Amazon is doing it with us in a consumer-to-consumer market. These are exactly the principles. Here in Amazon or in Microsoft or in Alibaba, we have proprietary homebrew, indoor, in-house solutions. They can fully control that by themselves. In a B2B environment, we are talking about of hundreds, thousands of suppliers, direct competitors, which need to collaborate. And it was already mentioned, and I cite him continuously by Dr. Betti, by Francesco Betti, that this cross-company collaboration is mandatory requirement to enable data economy and data businesses in the future. If we are in the consumer-to-consumer market, the trading is really controlled by a few proprietary in-house controlling companies that have the power to do that. And by that it fits and it always works. If you do that in an extreme cross-company way, as B2B is operationalized, the challenges are much higher. And for that, we need standardization and norming. And that brings me to Gaia X, a data infrastructure for Europe, as we call it, and not a cloud platform. That is not exactly right. So the title we should change afterwards. And our leading principles are that every domain faces similar problems. Cities, traffic, industry, health, etc. all face similar digitalization problems and perspectives. And the solutions are of very same nature as we observe. So it makes a lot of sense to work together there. We need data-based business models, and they must be based on European values that we all share. That is fairness and transparency. I talked already about interoperability. Data protection is key to success if we talk about business-to-business environments. Infrastructure is necessary for that. Commercialization and the raise of the value of data is the key principle to earn money in the end. So it must be a strong alliance of companies and organizations for Gaia X. And as you see, large companies, small, medium enterprises, and that is very valuable also for Switzerland, are necessary. Startups with their spirit, universities, R&D, smart factories, associations, and the public sector. So it's about currently 500 participants from about 300 companies that started that. And the idea is really to work on these three, let's say, levels is the wrong word, aspects. And here you see the X. So Gaia is the Greek goddess of the earth. That's a humanistic idea, was a humanistic idea. These days we are not so happy about the name Gaia itself, but okay, it's there. Important is the X. So the X has a blue part, an upper part, and a red lower part. So sovereign data exchange among domains, health, etc., industry is one level. Then code of conduct is the green center part. And let's say technologies on the bottom to enable all that. All these values, as I mentioned before, are on the lower part. Why do we do that? We found out that the very strict European data protection laws for private persons, and I'm not talking about those here, this is not related to private persons, what you are seeing, is very, very successful globally. We didn't expect it. At the beginning, everyone said, oh my God, now I have to work on privacy, data protection laws, etc. But it sensibilized the world. We find, or we observe that in other countries around European Union, these regulations, the so-called privacy data protection laws of the European Union, are adopted. They are cited in the specifications. And we believe that we can find, or we can create a similar level of global acceptance of Gaia X. It's still the principle of hope, that's for sure. But we believe that we are strong enough to be able to formulate a European set of rules and a set of a framework that is able to enable a data ecosystem with the necessary infrastructure for that ecosystem that sets a standard based on European values for data economy, and that this can be leveraged globally, and that this is a serious answer to the existing hyperscaler solutions that we are facing currently around the globe. As I mentioned before, the blue part covers everything: industrial, mobility, financial, energy, agriculture, health, the public sector, police, and military. That is not explicitly mentioned here, but these are also users of Gaia X. Certainly AI, as mentioned before by Professor Dong, and many others, IoT, the applications, the insights belong to that. And now it comes to this center part, which is so important. We have to have technical identity and trust on a technical level. And that is exactly what we are doing right now. You somehow trust me while I present to you. And this is the way how humans work. So we have in our language vocabularies, we have grammar, and we have rules for our dialogue. Right now we don't have a dialogue. I talk to you directly, but we have clear rules when we negotiate and have a dialogue, and they are culturally dependent. Those rules are different in Korea, in China, in Japan, in the United States, or in Europe. But they work and they can be interoperable. So we need ways for sovereign data exchange that are not locked in, so that are not proprietary, single company dependent. There it always works. If you look at Apple or Amazon, within those systems, it works perfectly. They have everything under control. This is not applicable to our highly complex, heterogeneous B2B environment we are talking about. For that, we have to have a federated catalog for the providers, nodes, and services. And very important is compliance. This has to be operationalized in a compliant way. And down here, you see all technologies and applications that are necessary to build the ecosystem. I will not go into any details there. And right now, we would like to focus on use cases. We would like to focus not so much on single customers, as it was mentioned before. We would like to focus on users. This is exactly what we would like to do. So, as you may observe, Amazon and also, let's say, Facebook and Google is coming to a scaling limit. The entire global population of about 6 billion people is reached quite quickly now. Then there's no more way for them to scale and to grow anymore. So the next thing they can grow into are things. So machines, services, etc. Not users like Volkswagen or BMW, customers like Volkswagen or BMW or Siemens or others, or Stäubli and so on and so forth. It's their things within these customers. This is the only way that you can scale. And so this user perspective, user-centric and not any more customer-centric perspective is exactly in which direction we will look for. We formulated some use cases. This is a dynamic, a few. One is very important for us with respect to industry and manufacturing where we are today. That's the collaborative condition monitoring, because it offers us the way to very deeply and broad, so completely cross-company, look at a topic which is related to smart manufacturing where we can learn a lot. So we believe that this use case is a good learning base on how to try out and to find out how Gaia X could be operationalized. There are many frameworks and topics here. I don't want to go into detail here. What I would like to say is that this Gaia X is completely European based. I will come back to the international perspective in a couple of slides. And it has a complete buy-in, and from my sentence before, you can understand it by all global hyperscalers. So Alibaba, Tencent on the Chinese side, and Microsoft, Amazon, Google on the American side are partners of Gaia X. So Gaia X is often misunderstood as a European cloud provider. This is not the case. Gaia X will not build a server farm or a storage farm or anything like this. But when you can offer Gaia X-based services, this is exactly what I showed here. So you can offer that, and you can get it and purchase it in the end then from Amazon or from Alibaba. Why is that so important? Possibly I should mention that. Imagine you're a small medium enterprise in Switzerland and you export a special machine which is so market attractive that you can export it globally. Then you will export this machine to the United States, to China, possibly even to Russia, to Turkey, to Namibia, to Mexico to whatever country you can think of globally. Then you are facing a problem because the risk is very high that the apps that you develop for that machine, that the industrial services that you offer around that machine, where you come in this data platform economy way, which is very different to how you exported your machine in the past, that all your maintenance that you do globally without having someone very close to the machine itself, you have to develop that quite several times, and that is very costly. So in America, you might have the need to use services from Amazon or from Microsoft. In China, you might need to use services from Alibaba. In Korea, you might be forced to use Naver and other service providers. And those apps for these hyperscalers are not interoperable because they are not following standards or norms. They are proprietary. And you have to redevelop your apps to be able to leverage on these platforms. This is one aspect. And the other aspect is, again, this Gaia X will not solve that completely. Don't get that wrong. But it sets a rule, a framework where you can follow. So base services are in this so-called federated catalog. And from that, you will be able to export globally without extra workload due to lock-in effects of hyperscalers. This is from an economic perspective what we are following here on the European level. And the other topic is, and we should be very honest, and again, I cite again Dr. Francisco Betti, the other thing is more critical from a legal perspective. Data itself falls globally under the copyright law. And the copyright law in regions of the world is very different. And there are regions in the world where a so-called backup copy can be taken is a very critical and serious topic. So when you are on an hyperscaler, it might have the right to take a backup copy and to keep that backup copy forever. So there's no way that you can ask your service provider to delete the data. That is not valid for all regions around the globe, but for some. And this is definitely critical for you when you're a Swiss small medium enterprise or any other European small medium enterprise, or as Dong just mentioned, a Korean small medium enterprise, because you don't have full control over your data for the future. There's always a history which is out of your sight. This is another topic where Gaia X extremely well works on. At least it is still a principle of hope, but we think that Europe is able to handle that. How can that be operationalized? There will be a Gaia X Foundation. It's based in Brussels. It collaborates with many partners. I don't want to go into any details there. And that will set that will work together with the governments and sets a framework, and will be the discussion center point to get these things going. One thing will be the repositories. So the Gaia X infrastructure will have a repository. We believe that this is key to success. On this repository, all the asset administration shells, where the self-descriptions of the assets, as I mentioned that before, let me go back here, can be stored in a fair and transparent way. That would be quite impressive if we have assets represented in a normative structure where you can basically browse them. That would be a major achievement. And a huge step forward towards real data economy on a B2B industrial level, a huge step forward. And we believe again that this would enable sustainability on a level as we didn't have seen it before. That would be a separate presentation, but let me just stick to that statement. The Gaia X Foundation has about 127 members from these countries here. There will be hubs. Certainly currently at the beginning phase, there's a focus on Europe. I mean, that is kind of obvious. There's no way that we can't do it like this. But the point is the following. We would like to see globally so-called hubs. So I just expect that there will be a Swiss Gaia X hub. Like there will be a Korean Gaia X hub. We are working already with Korea heavily on that. Like a Chinese Gaia X hub is on its way. United States Gaia X hub, as far as I know, a Mexico Gaia X hub is in development, etc., etc. We will have one in Russia, in Turkey, etc. Ukraine, where all the production takes place, etc. The one in Vietnam, Cambodia, all these places, Indonesia. And then there's the association. It's a federation, to be more precise. So they will interoperate. They will work together. Otherwise, the complexity might be too big. So this is taken care of here. And there are these so-called European data spaces. So this Gaia X fits very, very well to the European data strategy. And I would like to mention that this was published already in 2018 in its first version. It got updated several times. I think there was one slide, brief, small slide, where Dr. Francesco Betti mentioned it. I'm not totally sure if I followed all his slides precisely there. We believe that these European data spaces are an optimum way to operationalize cost-effective data economy on a level as we see it and observe it right now in America and in China. Again, all these different domains are participating. There's a hub founded already in France and in Germany and in the Netherlands formerly. Again, these regional hubs know their regions, know their ways. And then there are a few organizations that are then enabled to operationalize the knowledge and the basis from these regional hubs. Let's say this is now the Korean Gaia X hub, and then they can work together with the foundation, through the foundation on a global scale to, in the end, reduce the cost. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you, Dominik. Wow, this is a lot of content, and I think it's quite exclusive, the insight that you give us on Gaia X. Gaia X is a hot topic, and it's, of course, something that also we have to take into account here in Switzerland. So maybe one direct question from my side. What can Switzerland do in order to join this Gaia X effort?
Create a Gaia X hub. Very simple answer. Just 4 words.
Okay, 4 words. Can you break it down? How do we create the Gaia X hub?
There's a document which describes that is on the Gaia X website. This is the Gaia X website. It's called datainfrastructure.eu. And there is the hub building. Where is it? Somewhere here. I think here. If you click here, there are the instructions on how to do it. And this is the use case thing. So here we will find several use cases for different domains, and you can plug yourself into that. This is amazing. This is completely transparent and open. This will not have any login effects. This is impossible. It would not work if you have login. So many publications down here, and those publications give you a feeling on and a guidance on how to create the hub infrastructure. This is basically where you have to follow. This is all documented. So it is possibly I didn't mention that before. It is a how do I do this? Okay. It is a German-French initiative. It got started before the German EU presidency. You might be aware that every half year the presidency of the European Union moves to the next country. Currently, we are in the German presidency. So it was one of the key projects of the German presidency, and we got it prepared together with France. It is a very common approach in the last 50, 60 years that France and Germany, either from a French input or from a German input, do it together and then kind of roll it out in the European Union. That's a kind of accepted and common approach. We did it here. So yeah, a huge effort, 500 persons, that's quite a number of resources that work on that since about 1 year. And there's a lot of technology, like the so-called nodes. How do you formulate technically trustworthiness in itself is a huge topic. I mean, you're a researcher, Dominik. You know how difficult all that is on a level that B2B accepts it. I mean, if you are using now in your mobile phone an app that helps you to navigate or to find a restaurant, you don't care possibly too much about trustworthiness. You accept if the service doesn't work, and you are only individually affected by that. In a B2B environment, an energy system might be affected, or a health system, or a factory system might be affected. The dimension is very different. So we have to work on that very closely. Yeah, and we are very much hoping that Switzerland is building a hub and is contributing, because definitely France and Germany can't do it by themselves. It is completely open. We are not we know it better, in very opposite. And our good friend from Ulsan, from UNIST, from this fabulous university in Ulsan, I can recommend to all the listeners to once visit the UNIST University. It's a wonderful place. And also our friend in Mexico City with his university and institute, David Romero, Professor Romero, is showing that all his local and regional experiences and impact. How do these small medium enterprises in these areas of the world do it? How do they do their business in a digital diverse? Will be a good impact and a good input for Gaia X. And that can be channeled through the hub structure.
Thank you, Dominik. Thank you. Most certainly, we are going to join this effort with you. And a country that you have not mentioned, but I think that's also joining this approach toward Gaia X is Japan. I'm very proud to announce now Koki Mitani-san from NTT Software Innovation Center.